guys, welcome back to the next episode. I'm Uncle Eric, your science facilitator. I hope you enjoyed last week's lesson. This is just a continuation of what we did. Now let's have a recap of what we learned. First and foremost, we looked at what we mean by respiration. We also got to know what we mean by breathing and a whole lot more. I hope you've not forgotten them. Very good. Now let's start the lesson. Respiratory system. In today's lesson, we are going to look at the parts of the human respiratory system and how they function. First organ we are going to look at is the nostrils. All right, that's the first human respiratory organ we are going to look at, which is also referred to as the nasal cavity. Now let me show you my nostrils. The holes you see here are the nostrils. All right, the opening will be the nostrils, and then the hole you see here will be the nasal cavity. All right, so in other words, they perform similar functions. Take note of that. We also have pharynx, also referred to as throat. Okay, pharynx also referred to as the throat. We have larynx, also called voice box. We'll find out why we call this as the voice box very soon. We have the trachea, also referred to as the windpipe. And then bronchus. Now the bronchus, as you know, its plural form is bronchi, all right? Others refer to us as bronchi, okay? So bronchus also referred to as bronchi as plural or bronchi. We also have bronchial. Also, its plural form will be bronchioles, okay? All right. And then alveolus. Its plural form is alveoli. Take note of these. So nostrils, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchus, bronchial, alveolus, and lastly, we shall talk about the diaphragm. Note that the bronchial and alveolus are all located in the lungs, okay? Take note of that. And then the bronchus also stretches into the lungs as well. All right. The human respiratory system. There's a diagram of the human respiratory system. Let's look at some of the parts. First, we have the nasal cavity, stretching from this side up to this end. That's what we term as the nasal cavity. Now let me tell you something briefly about the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity has some tiny hair-like structures. They have some hair in them. All right? And we call that cilia. Aside that, they also have mucus. Now, the hair-like structure, which is cilia, is there to trap all the dust that will enter your nostrils. And then the mucus also help to moisten the air that will enter. In other words, it also keeps it very, very warm. All right? Take note of that. From the nostrils, the air stretches to the pharynx. Do you remember the other name we give to the pharynx? Look at this diagram carefully. Look at it carefully. Do you remember the other name we gave to it? We also called it the throat. Now, the pharynx stretches right from this end up to this end, meaning the mouth or the buccal cavity joins up with the nostrils here, being the pharynx, okay? Take note of that. From the pharynx, the next respiratory organ we shall talk about will be the larynx, also referred to as the voice box. This voice box we are talking about, or the larynx, contains what we call Adam's apple. Now, I want you to raise your head this way and then touch this part of your body. You can also try with daddy because daddy has a larger larynx, okay? In here, you will see the voice box. Now, when you touch it, you realize that it begins to vibrate. That is because it is responsible for the speech. Okay? It is responsible for speech. If you want to sing, talk, it's all the work of the larynx, which is also known as voice box. So now you know the reason why we term it as voice box, don't you? Good. It has Adam's apple, as you can see here. All right? So there's the larynx for you. The next one we shall talk about is the trachea, which is also called the windpipe. The windpipe. Note that from the nasal cavity coming down up to the trachea are the cilia and mucus. All right? There are tiny hair-like structures that lines up right from the nasal cavity up to where the trachea is located. The same thing applies to the mucus. Now, when we talk about mucus, I know you are wondering what mucus is. Now, when you blow your nose, you see some fluid coming out. That fluid you see coming out of the nose is what we term as the mucus. It helps a lot to moisten the air we breathe in. Moreover, it also helps us to fight against certain bacteria and other harmful organisms of the respiratory system. Okay, good. From the trachea, our next point will be the bronchi. These are the bronchi. The two branching tubes you see here are referred to as the bronchi. Okay, good. Singular being bronchus. This bronchus you see here stretches down to some small branches. Look at these branches. It's just like having a tree and some branches. Those branches you see here are what we term as the bronchioles. Okay? Look at the branches you see here. They are termed as the bronchioles, the tiny branches you see here. All right? From there, the air enters into some tiny sacs found at the end of each bronchiole. Tiny air sacs found at the end of each bronchiole. Those are what we refer to as the alveoli, singular being alveolus. All right? So right from the onset, nasal cavity air travels to the pharynx, to the larynx, down to the trachea, down to the bronchi, and then moves to the bronchioles and ends up in the alveoli. Now look under it. You will then find another respiratory organ known as the diaphragm. Very soon we shall find out the function of the diaphragm. Now let's look at the various respiratory organs one after the other briefly and see how they work in the respiratory system of humans. First, we shall talk about the nostrils. All right, good. Here, the nostril serves as a passage of air. Look here, if you look at these two holes, that's where air enters till it gets to the lungs. So the nostril is there to serve as a passage of air. 2, it contains cilia, as I said earlier on, which is a hair-like structure that traps dust from entering the lungs. You know, the lungs have been designed in such a way that they don't like dust. All right? Too much dust entering the lungs might cause damage. Aside that, we have other things that are very harmful to the lungs, like smoke. All right? That's why you shouldn't smoke anything if you don't want your lungs to be destroyed. So the cilia is there to trap all the dust that might enter the lungs. It also contains mucus that keeps the inhaled air warm and moisten it. Alright, good. The next point is pharynx, also referred to as throat. Let's look at how they function. So air from the nasal cavity moves on to the pharynx. Now, this pharynx we are talking about also contains the same cilia and mucus we are talking about, because it has been lined up just to trap as much as possible the dust that may enter the body. It also contains white blood cells. These white blood cells we are talking about are there to fight against bacteria, viruses, and other harmful organisms that might enter your lungs. Okay, good. Take note that COVID-19, as we are talking about, is also a virus, very harmful to our respiratory system. Good. From the pharynx, the air then moves on to the larynx, also known as the voice box. There, vibration takes place for us to get the speech we want. Alright? So as I said earlier, it contains what we call Adam's apple. That's what you see here. Okay? It also helps us to talk and sing. Without the larynx, you cannot talk and sing. Alright? It also contains mucus and cilia that filter the inhaled air. Good. Our next point is trachea. After that, the air then moves to the trachea, also known as the windpipe. Let's look at what the trachea does to the air when it gets there. As I said, it contains mucus and cilia that also trap dust and moistens the air. From there, we get to the bronchus. Let's see what it does. It is made up of two short tubes. Those two short tubes branch into the lungs. Okay? And these two short tubes are where the bronchioles that look like branches are located. It also contains mucus and cilia that trap dust particles and moisten the air. Then we get to the bronchioles. The bronchioles are the branches. You see, if you look at a tree, we have the main stem. All right? Aside that, there are some branches. The bronchioles are also like branches of a tree, but are located in the lungs. It also contains mucus and cilia that trap dust and moistens the air. Good. Then it gets to the alveoli, which looks like a balloon. Okay? They are tiny air sacs. Now, let's look at what they do. When you breathe in the air and gets to the alveoli, that's where the exchange of gas takes place. From there, the air moves into your blood capillaries, so that the blood will get the air and then help it release the energy you need. After the energy has been released, that's the same area where the carbon dioxide, which is not needed by the body, is also taken to, so that the lungs will then release them into the atmosphere. So you see, without the air sacs, there will be no exchange of gases. All right? So note, the oxygen that comes in ends up in the alveoli, where it is then taken to the blood capillaries to help release energy. After the energy has been released, the carbon dioxide is then taken back to the same alveoli. Okay? so that it can be released from the lungs. Now I want you to breathe in and out. There is something you will notice. When you breathe in, there is something under your lungs known as the diaphragm. Let's look at what the diaphragm does. Now the diaphragm is a tiny sheet-like structure that is found under your lungs. It is there to support the lungs when you are breathing. Okay? Now, how does it work? When you breathe in, the diaphragm contracts and moves down when the air is inhaled, in other words. Good. So it will then expand this way and move down. All right? Good. Aside that, when you breathe out, it then relaxes and moves up so that it will help the lungs to release the carbon dioxide in it. I hope you've taken note of these various organs of the respiratory system. Now, there are some important questions I would like to ask you. Which of these organs can we say is the main respiratory organ? Can you guess? It is the lung. It is the main respiratory organ as far as the human respiratory system is concerned. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Till we meet again, stay safe. Have a lovely day. I love you all. Bye-bye.